The harsh autumn wind carried dust across the lonesome street of Redemption Creek, as Abigail Zimmerman clutched her worn shawl tighter around her trembling shoulders. The year was 1876, and she had just buried her father, the last of her family, leaving her with nothing but debts and hunger gnawing at her empty stomach. The setting sun cast long shadows across the Colorado mining town as she stood before the Golden Nugget Saloon, her heart hammering against her ribs, knowing what she was about to offer was the only thing of value she had left. Abigail took a deep breath, steadying herself against the rough wooden post. At 22, she had never imagined her life would come to this, contemplating selling herself to survive another winter. Her father's mining claim had yielded nothing but false hope and mounting debts. Now the bank was taking their small cabin, and she hadn't eaten in 2 days. The saloon doors swung open, spilling golden light and raucous laughter onto the dusty street. Abigail flinched but held her ground. A man stumbled out, his eyes finding her immediately. "Well, ain't you a pretty little thing?" he slurred, reaching for her face with grimy fingers. She stepped back, her resolve faltering. "I'm looking for work," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The man grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "I bet you are, sweetheart. Come on in." Madame Ruby's always looking for fresh faces. Abigail followed him through the batwing doors, her legs threatening to give way beneath her. The saloon was filled with smoke, the clinking of glasses, and the tinny sounds of a piano. Men gathered around tables playing cards, while women in gaudy dresses laughed too loudly and sat on patrons' laps. "Ruby," the man called out, "got a new girl for you." A woman with flaming red hair piled high on her head turned. Her face was heavily powdered, but Abigail could see the years etched in the corners of her eyes. Ruby assessed her with a cool, calculating gaze. "What's your name, girl?" she asked, her voice raspy from years of smoke and whiskey. "Abigail Zimmerman, madam." Ruby circled her slowly. "You're a bit thin but clean, pretty face, could do well upstairs." She reached out to touch Abigail's hair. "Why you here?" Abigail swallowed the lump in her throat. "My father just died. The bank's taking our home. I need money." Ruby's expression softened momentarily. "First time?" Abigail nodded, shame burning her cheeks. "Well, we all start somewhere," Ruby said matter-of-factly. "Tonight you can serve drinks. Tomorrow we'll talk about the other work." Relief and dread mingled in Abigail's chest as she was handed an apron. At least she would earn enough for a meal tonight. The evening passed in a blur of unwanted touches and propositions. Abigail served drinks with trembling hands, dodging the more persistent customers. When a burly miner grabbed her wrist and tried to pull her onto his lap, she struggled to free herself. "Let go, please," she begged, panic rising in her throat. "Come on, darling, just a little kiss," he insisted, his grip tightening painfully. Suddenly, the miner's hand was wrenched away. A tall figure stood between them, his broad shoulders blocking Abigail's view. "The lady said no," came a deep, steady voice. The miner scowled. "Mind your own business, York. I was just being friendly." "Your kind of friendly isn't welcome," the man replied. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. The miner muttered a curse but retreated to his table. Abigail looked up at her rescuer. He was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. A Stetson hat sat atop his head, and a star-shaped badge gleamed on his vest. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once. "Lucas York, town sheriff, you new here?" "Yes, I'm Abigail Zimmerman." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Joseph Zimmerman's daughter," she nodded, surprised. "You knew my father. He was a good man. I was sorry to hear of his passing." Sheriff York's gaze softened. "You shouldn't be working here, Miss Zimmerman." Abigail felt tears stinging her eyes. "I have nowhere else to go, no other options." Before he could respond, Ruby appeared at her side. "Sheriff, always a pleasure, but my girls have work to do." Lucas York's jaw tightened. "She's not one of your girls, Ruby." Ruby smiled thinly. "Not yet, perhaps, but times are hard and pretty girls got to eat." She turned to Abigail. "Speaking of which, your shift is done. Here's your pay." She pressed a few coins into Abigail's palm, barely enough for a night at the boarding house and a meal. "Thank you," Abigail said, clutching the money. As Ruby walked away, Sheriff York leaned closer. "Come by my office tomorrow morning. I might know of more suitable work." Abigail nodded gratefully, then slipped out of the saloon into the cool night air. She found a room at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house, ignoring the landlady's disapproving glance at her saloon-scented clothes. In the small, sparse room, Abigail counted her meager earnings. It wouldn't last long. Ruby had made it clear what tomorrow would bring if she returned to the Golden Nugget. The thought made her stomach churn, but starvation was an equally terrifying prospect. She fell into a restless sleep, dreaming of her father and the life they'd once had. Morning came too quickly, sunlight streaming through the thin curtains. Abigail washed her face with cold water and dressed in her cleanest dress, a faded blue cotton that had once belonged to her mother. The sheriff's office was a small building on the main street. Abigail hesitated outside, gathering her courage before knocking on the weathered door. "Enter," called the deep voice she recognized from the night before. Sheriff Lucas York sat behind a desk cluttered with papers. He stood when she entered, removing his hat. "Miss Zimmerman, I'm glad you came." "You said you might know of work," she asked, hope flickering in her chest. He gestured to a chair. "Please sit." When she complied, he continued, "I knew your father well. He spoke often of you, how proud he was that you were educated back east." Abigail nodded. "My mother's sister paid for my schooling in Boston. I came back when she passed away 3 years ago. Your father mentioned you were a teacher there." "An assistant teacher," she corrected. "For young children." Lucas smiled, and it transformed his serious face. "Perfect. Our school teacher, Miss Holloway, is expecting a child and needs to return east to her family. The town council has been searching for a replacement." Abigail's heart leaped. "A teaching position, here in Redemption Creek. It doesn't pay much," he warned. "But it comes with living quarters above the schoolhouse and is certainly more respectable than—" He trailed off, his expression darkening. "Than selling myself," Abigail finished bluntly. Lucas met her gaze directly. "A woman like you shouldn't have to make such choices. You're meant to be cherished, not traded." Something in his intense gaze made her breath catch. She looked away, afraid of the unexpected warmth spreading through her chest. "The position is yours if you want it," he said, his voice gentler. "School starts next Monday." "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, I accept. Thank you, Sheriff York." "Lucas," he corrected with a small smile. "And you're welcome, Miss Zimmerman." "Abigail," she offered in return. He nodded. "Abigail." The way he said her name made it sound like something precious. Over the next few days, Lucas helped Abigail move her few belongings into the small but clean apartment above the schoolhouse. The room had a bed, a stove, a small table with 2 chairs, and a bookshelf filled with worn schoolbooks. "It's not much," Lucas apologized as he set down her trunk. Abigail ran her hand over the smooth wood of the desk. "It's perfect. I never thought." She swallowed hard. "Thank you." He shifted awkwardly, his hat in his hands. "I'll introduce you to the town council tomorrow. They'll want to meet you before school starts." True to his word, Lucas escorted her to meet the council members the following day. Most were welcoming, though a few eyed her with suspicion, having seen her at the saloon. "Miss Zimmerman comes highly recommended," Lucas stated firmly when one councilman made a pointed comment about her brief employment at the Golden Nugget. She was educated in Boston and has teaching experience. His unwavering support silenced further objections, and Abigail was officially appointed as the new schoolteacher of Redemption Creek. The weekend passed in a flurry of preparation. Abigail cleaned the schoolhouse from top to bottom, organized books and supplies, and created lesson plans. Lucas stopped by each day, bringing small gifts, a jar of honey from the general store, wildflowers he'd picked on his rounds, a new slate for her desk. On Sunday evening, as she nervously reviewed her plans for the first day, a knock came at her door. Lucas stood outside with a covered basket. "I thought you might be too busy to eat," he explained, stepping inside when she invited him. "Mrs. Barnes at the cafe packed some supper for you." Abigail was touched by his thoughtfulness. "Would you join me? There's plenty." They ate at her small table, and for the first time since her father's death, Abigail felt something like contentment. Lucas told stories of the town and its inhabitants, making her laugh with tales of local characters. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked suddenly, the question that had been lingering in her mind finally escaping. Lucas set down his coffee cup, considering her question. "Your father saved my life once, years ago when I first came to these parts. I was young and foolish, got caught in a flash flood. He pulled me out, took me in until I recovered." He paused. "But it's more than that. You remind me that there's still goodness in this world, Abigail." The way he looked at her made her heart skip. "I was ready to give up that goodness," she admitted softly. "At the saloon, you were surviving," he interrupted. "There's no shame in that, but now you can live, not just survive." The next morning, Abigail stood nervously before 23 children ranging in age from 6 to 16. They stared at her with curious eyes as she introduced herself. "Good morning, I am Miss Zimmerman, your new teacher." A small girl in the front raised her hand immediately. "Are you going to stay?" Miss Holloway left. Abigail smiled. "Yes, I plan to stay." The children proved eager to learn, and by the end of the day, Abigail felt a sense of purpose she'd feared was lost forever. As the students filed out, she noticed Lucas leaning against a tree in the schoolyard, watching with a gentle smile. "How was your first day?" he asked as he walked her back to her quarters. "Wonderful," she admitted. "Exhausting, but wonderful," he grinned. "The children already adore you. I heard little Emma Miller telling her mother she wants to be just like the new teacher when she grows up." Abigail blushed with pleasure. "They're good children." Over the following weeks, Abigail settled into her role as teacher. The townspeople gradually accepted her, inviting her to social gatherings and church functions. Lucas remained a constant presence, stopping by the schoolhouse often, accompanying her to town events, and bringing her small gifts that showed how attentively he listened to her. When she mentioned missing her books, he appeared the next day with 3 novels from his own collection. When she admired Mrs. Peterson's roses, he planted 2 bushes beside her door. When she spoke of loving autumn, he took her riding to see the aspen trees turning gold in the mountains. One crisp October afternoon, Lucas invited her on a picnic. They rode to a meadow overlooking a valley ablaze with fall colors. As they shared a meal of cold chicken and apple pie, Abigail realized she was falling in love with the quiet, thoughtful sheriff. "What brought you to Redemption Creek?" she asked, watching him whittle a small wooden figure, his habit when his hands needed occupation. Lucas considered the question. "I was running from my past, I suppose. My father was a rancher in Texas, wanted me to take over the family business, but we never saw eye to eye. After the war, I couldn't settle back into that life." "You fought in the war?" Abigail hadn't known. He nodded, his expression somber. "Confederate side. Not by choice. Texas seceded and I was drafted. Saw things I wish I could forget." He paused, staring at the distant mountains. Afterward, I drifted. Worked as a ranch hand, a deputy in various towns. Then I met your father, and something about this place felt right. You still talk to your family? Lucas shook his head. My father passed 5 years ago. Mother followed a year later. I have a younger brother somewhere in California. We write occasionally. You're alone too, she said softly. His blue eyes found hers. Not anymore. The air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Lucas reached out, his fingers lightly brushing a strand of hair from her face. Abigail's breath caught at the tenderness of the gesture. The moment was broken by distant thunder. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising a storm. We should head back, Lucas said reluctantly, packing up their picnic. They barely made it to the schoolhouse before the rain began, a sudden downpour that had them laughing as they ran for shelter. Inside, they stood dripping on the floor, and Lucas helped remove her wet shawl, his hands lingering on her shoulders. I should go, he said, though he made no move toward the door. Abigail found her courage. Stay, please. Lucas stepped closer, his hand gently cupping her cheek. Abigail, I need you to know something. Since the moment I saw you, I've felt, he struggled for words. I've never met anyone like you. Your strength, your kindness, despite everything you've faced. Lucas, she whispered, her heart pounding. I'm falling in love with you, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. I think I have been since that first night. Instead of answering with words, Abigail stood on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer as he deepened the kiss. When they finally parted, both breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for so long, he murmured. Abigail smiled. Why did you wait? I needed you to know I wanted you for you, not because of any obligation or circumstance. His expression grew serious. I want to court you properly, Abigail Zimmerman, if you'll have me. Yes, she answered without hesitation. Yes, I will. Their courtship became the talk of Redemption Creek. Lucas would wait for her after school, bringing flowers or small gifts. On Sundays, they attended church together, then took long walks along the creek. In the evenings, they sat on the schoolhouse porch, talking for hours about books, dreams, and memories. Not everyone approved. Some whispered about Abigail's brief time at the saloon, questioning if she was suitable for the town sheriff. Ruby, who had lost a potential investment, spread malicious rumors. But Lucas remained steadfast, publicly escorting Abigail to every social function and making his intentions clear. As November arrived, bringing the first dusting of snow, Abigail prepared her students for their Christmas pageant. Lucas helped build the stage, staying late into the evening to work alongside her on decorations and costumes. One night, as they painted backdrop scenery in the schoolroom, Lucas grew unusually quiet. What's troubling you? Abigail asked, setting down her paintbrush. He sighed. I received a telegram today. There's been trouble at the silver mine outside town. The owner is bringing in armed men to break the workers' strike. That sounds dangerous. It is. I need to ride out there tomorrow, try to keep the peace before someone gets hurt. He rubbed his forehead, leaving a smudge of blue paint that made Abigail smile despite her concern. How long will you be gone? A few days, maybe a week. He took her hand. I'll miss you every minute. Abigail squeezed his fingers. Be careful. Lucas left the next morning. The days stretched endlessly without him. Abigail threw herself into teaching and preparing for the pageant, but her thoughts constantly drifted to the silver mine and its potential dangers. 4 days after Lucas's departure, a violent snowstorm swept through the region. As Abigail dismissed her students early, urging them to hurry home before the worst hit, she worried about Lucas caught in such weather. That night, as wind howled around the schoolhouse, she heard a pounding at her door. Her heart leaped, thinking Lucas had returned, but instead she found a young miner, his face bloodied and desperate. "Miss Zimmerman, I'm Sam Whitaker. Sheriff York sent me. There's been violence at the mine. Men are hurt, including the sheriff." Abigail's blood ran cold. "How badly is he injured?" "Took a bullet to the shoulder. He's conscious but losing blood. The company doctor's been fired for helping strikers, and the town doctor can't get through the storm." Sam swallowed hard. "Sheriff said you might help, said you had medical knowledge." During her time in Boston, Abigail had assisted a doctor who treated children at the school. It wasn't much, but it was something. "Let me gather supplies," she said, fighting her rising panic. They rode through the blizzard on Sam's sturdy horse, Abigail clinging to him as icy wind cut through her layers. The mining camp was a collection of crude shelters and tents. Sam led her to a larger tent where several injured men lay on makeshift pallets. Lucas was pale, his shirt soaked with blood around his left shoulder. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Abigail, you shouldn't be here," he rasped. "It's not safe." She knelt beside him, already examining his wound. "Hush, I'm exactly where I need to be." Working through the night, Abigail cleaned and bandaged wounds, set a broken arm, and tended to Lucas's gunshot injury. The bullet had passed through cleanly, but he'd lost a lot of blood and developed a fever. For 3 days, she remained at the mining camp, nursing the injured men while negotiations between miners and owners continued in tense meetings. She barely slept, staying by Lucas's side as he fought infection and fever. On the 3rd night, his fever broke. Abigail was dozing in a chair beside his cot when his hand found hers. "Angel," he whispered. "My guardian angel." Her eyes flew open. "Lucas, how do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of buffalo." His smile was weak but genuine. "You saved me. You would have done the same for me." She brushed damp hair from his forehead. "Marry me," he said suddenly. Abigail blinked, certain she'd misheard. "What, marry me?" Lucas repeated, his blue eyes intense despite his weakened state. "Life's too short to waste a single day. I love you, Abigail Zimmerman. I want to spend whatever days I have left with you by my side." Tears filled her eyes. "You're delirious from fever," he shook his head. "Never been more clear-headed. Say yes." "Yes," she whispered, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you." The next day, with the storm cleared and a settlement reached between miners and owners, they returned to Redemption Creek. Lucas was weak but improving, his arm in a sling. Word of their engagement and Abigail's bravery during the mining dispute spread quickly. To her surprise, the town's attitude shifted. The same people who had whispered behind her back now brought gifts and well wishes. Even Ruby acknowledged her with a grudging nod when they passed on the street. "You've won them over," Lucas said one evening as they sat by the fire in his small house where he was recuperating. "I didn't do it for their approval," Abigail replied, adjusting his bandage. He caught her hand, kissing her palm. "I know. That's why they respect you now. You showed them who you truly are." As Christmas approached, Abigail divided her time between teaching, planning the school pageant, and caring for Lucas. His recovery was steady, and by mid-December he was back to light duties at the sheriff's office. The Christmas pageant was a resounding success. Children sang carols and performed the nativity story while proud parents watched. Afterward, the town gathered for a celebration with food, dancing, and gift exchanges. Lucas pulled Abigail away from the festivities, leading her outside where snow fell softly in the lantern light. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He produced a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold ring with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "It was my mother's," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. I had it sent from Texas. I want you to have it if you like it." "It's beautiful," Abigail breathed as he slipped it onto her finger. "Not as beautiful as you." Lucas pulled her close, kissing her tenderly. "Merry Christmas, future Mrs. York." They were married on New Year's Day, 1877, in the small church of Redemption Creek. The entire town attended, the schoolchildren serving as flower bearers and ring bearers. Abigail wore a cream-colored dress that the town's women had helped her make, with lace from Mrs. Peterson's wedding gown and pearl buttons donated by the general store owner's wife. As they exchanged vows, Lucas's voice never wavered. "I promise to cherish you all the days of my life, to honor and protect you, to love you through whatever storms may come." Abigail's voice trembled with emotion as she responded, "I promise to stand by your side in joy and sorrow, to love and support you, to build a life of purpose and meaning together." Their kiss sealed the promises, met with cheers and applause from the gathered townspeople. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with dancing, feasting, and toasts to the new couple. As evening fell, Lucas led his bride to their home, his small house that they had spent weeks preparing together, adding feminine touches to the bachelor's quarters. At the threshold, he swept her into his arms, mindful of his healing shoulder. "Welcome home, Mrs. York." Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth, and candles cast a warm glow over the simple but comfortable rooms. Lucas set Abigail gently on her feet, suddenly looking nervous. "Are you happy?" he asked, searching her face. In answer, she reached up to touch his cheek. "Happier than I ever thought possible." Their kiss deepened, passion building between them. With tender reverence, Lucas guided her to their bedroom, where they discovered each other fully for the first time, their bodies and souls joining in love's most intimate expression. Later, as they lay wrapped in each other's arms, Abigail rested her head on Lucas's chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. "I never thought I would find this," she confessed. "After my father died, I thought my life was over. I was ready to throw away everything I valued just to survive." Lucas's arms tightened around her. "You never have to make that choice again. Everything I have is yours. Everything I am belongs to you." Spring brought new beginnings to Redemption Creek. The snow melted, revealing tender green shoots and wildflowers. Abigail continued teaching, her students thriving under her care. Lucas's reputation as a fair and honest lawman grew, bringing more stability to the once rowdy mining town. Their home became a gathering place for the community. On Sundays after church, friends would join them for meals. In the evenings, they often sat on their porch watching the sunset and planning their future. "I've been thinking," Lucas said one warm May evening as they rocked side by side. "The Johnsons are selling their small ranch outside town." Abigail glanced at him. "Are you thinking of buying it?" He nodded. "Being sheriff is important work, but I miss working the land sometimes. The ranch has good water, decent grazing. We could raise horses, maybe some cattle. You want to leave your position as sheriff, not immediately, but eventually, yes." Lucas took her hand. "I want to build something that will last, something we can pass down to our children someday." The mention of children made Abigail smile. "I think it's a wonderful idea." By summer, they had purchased the Johnson Ranch, 50 acres with a sturdy cabin, barn, and corral. Weekends were spent making improvements, planting a garden, and acquiring a few horses. Lucas began training a young deputy named Mike Fletcher, preparing him to eventually take over as sheriff. One August morning, as they worked side by side in their garden, Abigail suddenly felt lightheaded. Lucas caught her as she swayed, concern etched on his face. "Are you all right? You're pale." She smiled, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. I think we should consider adding a nursery to the cabin." His eyes widened, joy spreading across his features. "You're sure?" she nodded. "Dr. Thompson confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a baby, probably in early spring." Lucas whooped with joy, lifting her carefully and spinning her around. "A baby, our baby!" He set her down gently, dropping to his knees to press a reverent kiss to her abdomen. "Hello, little one. Your pa can't wait to meet you." The news of their expected child delighted the town. Gifts of baby blankets, tiny clothes, and handcrafted toys began appearing. The school board insisted Abigail take time off after the baby arrived, promising to hold her position for when she was ready to return. As her body changed with pregnancy, Lucas became even more attentive, insisting she rest while he took on additional household duties. He spent evenings crafting a cradle from pine, his large hands working with surprising delicacy. "What shall we name the baby?" Abigail asked one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting protectively over her growing bump. "If it's a boy, maybe Joseph, after your father," Lucas suggested. Abigail smiled, touched by the gesture. "And if it's a girl, Elizabeth, after my mother. Joseph or Elizabeth York." She savored the names. Perfect. Winter arrived with unusual severity that year. Heavy snows isolated the ranch for days at a time. Lucas made sure they were well supplied, venturing into town only when absolutely necessary for his sheriff duties. In late January, during a particularly harsh blizzard, Abigail began feeling strange pains. "It's too early," she whispered fearfully when Lucas noticed her discomfort. He immediately bundled her into their bed, stoking the fire to keep the cabin warm. "What can I do?" "Send for the midwife," she gasped as another pain gripped her. Lucas looked outside at the howling storm, his face torn. "I can't leave you, and no one could make it through this weather." "Then it's just us," Abigail said, trying to sound braver than she felt. For hours, Lucas tended to her, following her instructions and keeping her comfortable as the labor progressed. Despite his outward calm, terror gripped him. He had seen men die on battlefields, but nothing had prepared him for the helplessness of watching his beloved wife in pain. Near dawn, as the storm finally began to subside, Elizabeth York entered the world with a robust cry. Lucas, hands trembling, wrapped his daughter in a soft blanket and placed her in Abigail's arms. "She's perfect," he whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "You're both perfect." Abigail looked down at their daughter's tiny face, overwhelmed with love. "She has your eyes." As soon as the roads cleared, Dr. Thompson came to check on mother and baby, pronouncing them both healthy despite the early arrival. "You did well, Sheriff," the doctor said, clapping Lucas on the shoulder. "Not many men could have handled a birth so competently." Lucas shook his head. "It was all Abigail. She's the strongest person I know." Spring brought renewal to the land and new rhythms to their life. Lucas resigned as sheriff, turning over his badge to Deputy Fletcher. He focused on expanding their ranch, adding cattle and improving the pastures while Abigail tended to baby Elizabeth and their growing garden. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Elizabeth sleeping in Abigail's arms, Lucas reflected on their journey. "A year and a half ago we were strangers. Now look at us." Abigail leaned against his shoulder. "Sometimes I can hardly believe how much has changed. From the darkest moment of my life came the greatest joy." Lucas kissed the top of her head. "Do you ever regret it, coming back west with your father instead of staying in Boston?" "Never," she answered without hesitation. "This is where I belong. With you, with our daughter, building our life together." As if hearing her name, Elizabeth stirred, opening eyes the same shade of blue as her father's. Lucas gently took her from Abigail's arms, cradling her against his broad chest. "Your mama is the bravest woman I know, little Lizzie," he told the infant softly. "She taught me what real strength looks like." Abigail watched them, her heart full. "And your papa taught me what it means to be truly cherished." Lucas reached for her hand, linking their fingers together. "That's a promise I intend to keep for all our days, Mrs. York. You will always be cherished, never traded." In the golden light of sunset, with their daughter between them and their future stretching bright before them, Abigail knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just survival, but a life worth living, a life built on love, respect, and the courage to believe in second chances. As the years passed, the York Ranch prospered. They added more land, built a larger house, and welcomed two more children: Joseph, born 2 years after Elizabeth, and Catherine, who arrived 3 years later. Abigail eventually returned to teaching part-time, while Lucas became known for breeding some of the finest horses in Colorado territory. Redemption Creek grew from a rough mining town into a respectable community with a proper school building, a courthouse, and even a small library that Abigail helped establish. The Golden Nugget Saloon remained, but under new management after Ruby moved on to Denver. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas surprised Abigail with a trip to Boston to visit her old friends and show their children the city where their mother had once taught. Standing on the Commons, watching 9-year-old Elizabeth marvel at the tall buildings while Joseph chased pigeons and little Catherine slept in her arms, Abigail felt the full circle of her journey. "Any regrets?" Lucas asked, his arm around her waist, his once golden hair now threaded with silver at the temples. Abigail looked up at the man who had saved her in more ways than one, the man who had taught her that love wasn't about transactions, but about cherishing another soul completely. "Not a single one," she answered, standing on tiptoe to kiss him as a new century approached on the horizon, promising even more adventures for the family they had built together from the most unlikely of beginnings.